Tuned in to a fireside chat with Zany Mystic. Join us now on another exciting metaphysical journey. Relax, tune in, drop out, and take a seat by the fire as we explore new realms and possibilities. This is Magenta Pixie. You can find me at magentapixie.weebly.com. But now, here is Zany Mystic and guest. Enjoy the show.
To a fireside chat with Zany Mystic. I'm your host, Lance White. Tonight, my guest is Peter Gorman. For nearly 25 years, Peter has worked with ayahuasca, the visionary vine and master plant teacher of the Amazon. While his work as a journalist has taken him from the streets of New York to the back alleys of Bombay, since 1984, Peter Gorman has made a point of spending at least 3 months annually in the jungle around Iquitos, Peru, and until recently, at least part of that time with his late teacher, the elderly curandero Julio Jarena. His new book is an amazing journey and adventure called Ayahuasca in My Blood, 25 Years of Medicine Dreaming. It's a wild ride, which I loved and can only describe as a cross between Indiana Jones meets Graham Hancock's Entangled. His website is at www.pgorman.com, and the others you can find off of there. So let's welcome Peter to the show now. Hi, Peter. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me, Lance. I appreciate it.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you because I'll tell you, when I read your book, I started it and I couldn't put it down. It was absolutely like riveting. It was riveting.
Nice. That was what was supposed to happen.
Well, you did a darn good job on it.
Good.
Maybe I know a lot of people are, are searching during these times of collapse and questioning. They're searching for various things, and a lot of my friends and people that I know are turning to ayahuasca and other mind-enhancing substances. Maybe we could begin with what it was like to live your life in the jungles and kind of paint us a little picture, a visual panorama of your life there in Peru.
Well, okay. Long story short, I loved jungle. I loved jungle in India. Mm-hmm. I loved jungle in Mexico. I loved jungle in Guatemala and Belize. And I was living with a woman, a wonderful, wonderful gal named Claire, who thought, oh my God, Peter is probably bound for the Amazon. And that is going to kill him. So she found a book at anyway, she found an old book called Headhunters of the Amazon by Updegraff, written in 1906, I believe. Mm-hmm. And it was the story of a fellow from upstate New York who had an Ecuadorian college roommate. And the college roommate said, my dad owns gold mines in Ecuador. Why don't you come down and visit us? I'll pay for your airfare. This is 1895, 1896, boat fare or whatever. In any event, when Updegraff got there was an uprising among the natives, the indigenous, and Updegraff ended up spending several years traveling on the Rio Yavari, the border between Peru and Brazil. Mm-hmm. And while the book was meant to shoo me away from the Amazon, it gave me a point of, I would love to see this no man's land. And I immediately began to make preparations. And the preparations were to go to Iquitos, Peru, from where I might be able to catch a boat to the headwaters of the Yavari and then travel the Yavari. In fact, that did not really happen. What happened was that went with a couple of friends, and we ended up in some river towns in Peru and traveling with this guide for a little bit named Moises Torres Viana, who was brilliant and who unfortunately has had an accident where he's hit by a car and isn't really cognizant anymore, but he's still a great friend and still alive, but just not thinking clearly. And he said, I will take you out to the jungle, but you are going to commit to me as my student. And Moises would bring me out 30 days, 40 days, 50 days into the middle of the goddamn jungle. he would say, we're going to walk from Iquitos, Peru to Brazil on this path. And there is no path. We're going to make one.
Oh, my God.
He threw away all the food on the first trip and left me with like one tin of Nescafe instant coffee.
Oh, my God.
As like, you either eat leaves or you don't. You can have a cup of coffee in the morning. So it was a wonderful experiment over the course of several years to learn when you're in the middle of this, there is nothing on your side.
Oh, I can imagine.
You either learn to pick plants and leaves, burrow for fruit, eat insects, or you're not going to make it.
Or the insects eat you.
Well, we ate. There's an insect called surety, which is, I don't know if your listeners live anywhere near Florida, where they have something called a June bug.
Oh, yeah,
It's like the hugest Japanese beetle you ever saw.
Yeah.
Okay, the larvae for that bug is called surety.
Oh.
Surety is about a 2-inch earthworm. Now, it lives only in one place. It lives in the male of the aguaje tree. The aguaje tree is a tree that bears fruit. The females bear fruit that wild boar love. It needs to get pollinated by the male. But once it's been pollinated once, it never needs pollination again. And so women will cut down the males, which bear no fruit, and they will urinate. It's a spine tree. It's got 12-inch spines on it. So it's a very delicate operation. They urinate on this tree, and the smell of the female urine attracts the insects, which lay their larvae inside. That larvae becomes 2-inch earthworms, or kind of like looking like earthworms, and that becomes your primary protein source in the middle of the jungle.
Oh, yummy!
You find those trees and you knock on them, and then
that sounds like fun.
It's really not the life for most people.
No.
When you ask, what about my life down there? My life down there was learning things like women are urinating on trees to attract larvae, and that's protein. So this is it's really not a conventional. Hey, I went to a camp and had a great time for a month. No, my experience was not that. Right.
In fact, you spent more years living like that in the natural habitat without any electricity or conveniences, learning from some of the oldest indigenous shamans that were around. In particular, your teacher or your, the medicine man, Julio, that plays a significant part in your book. Do you remember some of your first journeys and when you met him, and when did you feel like you were getting in touch with the spirit of the wilderness and of the plants?
On the first trip down to Peru, I was with two friends, and I was so sick of my friends insisted that we go to the mountains and we go to the coast, etc. I'd convinced them to go to Peru. And in return, they said, we'll go to the jungle, but first you got to do the mountains, you got to do Machu Picchu, walking the trail, etc.
Yeah.
By the time we got to the jungle, I was so sick of guides. We met a little fellow named Moises Torres Viana who said, I'll take you out to the jungle. I said, get out of here. We'll just catch a riverboat. We'll go up the river somewhere. We'll find a guide. We'll go there. So we went up the river to a little town called Ricana. There was nothing there. No one would take us to the jungle. I mean, it didn't matter what we bribed them with. They were so afraid of Indians, snakes, crocodiles, jaguars. No one would take ghosts. They wouldn't take us out. When we arrived back in Iquitos, 12 days later or so, who was waiting for us except Moises Torres Viana, saying, now would you like to go to the jungle? And I said, no, we just been. He said, bullshit. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it. He said, baloney.
You can say anything you want.
Okay, you didn't. No one would take you out there. Now, would you like to go to the jungle? And we ended up going out with him for 3 days. During which time we drank ayahuasca with a fellow named Alfonso. I'd never heard of it. None of us had. It was 1984. And there was no internet. And McKenna Brothers had not written about it yet. And it was totally blind to us. But Moises said, if you would like to learn about the jungle, you need to drink this drink. And we ended up drinking with a fellow named Alfonso. And I had an extraordinary experience where I associated with a bird, ate a fish, almost choked, swallowing the fish. I mean, my physical body was choking, swallowing the fish that the bird cut in half. And I thought, I need to do more of this, whatever the hell this is. So I came back the following year and did 30 days with Moises, and I thought I would go back to see this fellow, Alphonse. In fact, Alphonse, like a lot of people in the jungle, moved with the weather, and he was no longer there. Moises said, you're going to do 30 days in the jungle. Let me take you to this river you've never been on. There happens to be an old curandero there, and he'll give you ayahuasca. And then we'll go out for 30 days. And that's where I met Julio, who became my teacher for, I don't know, 200 or 300 times. We drank ayahuasca together, and maybe, I don't know, I spent sometimes 2 weeks with him, sometimes a month, sometimes 3 days. But, every year I spent days and days and days with this fellow. And when I got married, I spent with her and my kids and all that. This wonderful old curandero who was the most humble little fisherman on the middle of a river, who was living on a pension for having been in 2 wars and been shot twice.
Wow.
And which, having been shot twice, gave him a pension of almost, let's say, $350 American a month. So he was, although he suffered from the bullet wounds, he was supporting I knew 9 children. I've since met 3.
Wow.
So I knew 4 of his wives, 9 children, plus now 12, maybe 3 or 4 more. And he just happened to be the healer on a particular river called the Okayaku. And we became fast friends. Now, when I did ayahuasca, I didn't do it I think now, sometimes people think ayahuasca is a cure-all or ayahuasca will fix your life. I was